Hello, and welcome to another episode of VaeciaReads. I'll be reading from r/askreddit today. I have a new set of short stories for you guys, focusing on some strange mysteries that have yet to be solved. Feel free to grab a drink, prop your feet up, and relax as I take you through each one. Let's begin. What is the strangest mystery that is still unsolved? The lost A-bomb off the coast of America. The US government said not to worry about it in the 50s and tried to cover it up. It was dumped in the ocean in an aviation accident. It's still lost to this day, 100 times more powerful than what was dropped in Japan. There was this other bomb that fell out of a bomb bay above the US. They told everyone it was fine. Later, they revealed that 3 out of 4 failsafes had been activated. Only one more, and there would have been an explosion. I can't find it, but it should be in here along with other accidents. How convenient that one of the most powerful weapons in history was lost. One would expect you'd be more careful handling that stuff. I remember seeing a video about a woman. After getting divorced, she started getting stalked and assaulted in her own home. Every time police would arrive, no one but her was at the scene. Sometimes she would appear with bruises. Once she appeared with a screwdriver through her hand. After investigating her husband, there were no other suspects. This happened so many times that police started ignoring her calls. 3 months later, she disappeared just to reappear next to a highway in the middle of the desert, miles away from her house, with her hands tied, dead. Autopsy later confirmed she had been beaten to death. Scariest story I know. The case is the death of Cindy James. Some of the details are different, but it's all detailed there. This is interesting. I was reading Cindy's case. It just reeked to me of a police officer being involved. Then I saw she'd been involved with one. Poor woman. How on earth could her death be ruled a suicide? In 1994, there was a rainstorm in Oakville, Washington. Only the raindrops were a strange, clear substance that had the consistency of jello. Lots of people experienced flu-like symptoms after coming into contact with it. People's dogs and cats all over the city were dying. After a suggestion from a patient, a local hospital ran a lab test on the substance. It was found that whatever this mysterious rain was, it had human white blood cells in it. Sometime after that, a sample was also sent to the Washington State Health Laboratory, where it was being researched by epidemiologist Mike McDowell. After he determined that it was man-made, he speculated that it was some sort of matrix for transporting viruses or bacteria. The sample suddenly went missing from the containment facility. His supervisor told him not to ask any questions. There are no known samples of the stuff anywhere today, despite being sent to several different facilities by various Oakville residents. So yeah, I'd personally say that this was clearly some sort of bioweapon test run, but by whom? I'd like to give the US government the benefit of the doubt here and assume it wasn't us testing something like that on our own citizens. But if it wasn't, why would it have been covered up like that? And you'd think an event like this would be a lot less obscure. Also, even if it being a bioweapon seems super obvious, how the heck did whoever dispersed it manage to make it rain over an entire city for several days? You give them too much credit. There have been several incidents that have come to light in the last few years or decades that involve the US government directly testing weapons and or medicine on the unwitting and unsuspecting populace. Operation Sea Spray in San Francisco comes to mind. Also, they did something similar in the Chicago subways at some point. Also, Shad, where they spray toxic substances on ships with thousands of unprepared sailors on board. In 1976, residents of the small city south of Columbus, Ohio, began receiving handwritten, sinister, and graphic letters. Each letter included secret and dark details about their personal lives. One resident received a ton of letters accusing her of various unsavory acts. The author warned a resident that he had been keeping an eye on her home, as well as her comings and goings. The resident was horrified and tried to keep the letters a secret until her husband began receiving them. The attacks on the family continued, with large posters appearing around town spreading rumors about their 12-year-old child. One day, in 1977, the husband left the house after receiving a call from who he thought was writing the letters. A few minutes later, the husband was found dead at the end of the street, behind the wheel. The sheriff had ruled it a homicide when he realized that a single shot had been fired before the accident, but there was no evidence that the husband was shot at the site. The sheriff found the husband was twice the legal limit and ruled it a drunk driving accident. The letters began once again, this time accusing the sheriff of covering up the true nature of the death. The letters also accused the sheriff of mishandling an investigation into the county coroner, who had been accused of other grotesque acts. The harassment continued, this time with signs along the road. In 1983, the original resident who had been accused of having an affair pulled over to remove a sign. During the effort to remove this sign, she discovered a box was attached, and inside of it was a small pistol. The gun was part of a booby trap designed to fire when the sign was removed. Paul Freshour was arrested and was given 25 years, but one small problem. The letter writing continued even after Freshour was put in jail. In a batch of letters, the author had promised to dig up the grave of a deceased baby and mail the bones to the police in the case of another potential affair turned murder. Hundreds of residents continued to receive personal letters until 1994, when everything stopped. It's likely the letter sender passed away. You might try to find people in that town that passed in that time frame. I grew up near Circleville and never heard of those letters. Thanks for sharing this. On April 19, 1995, a truck bomb detonated outside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The explosion killed 168 in what was the deadliest terrorist attack on the United States until 9/11. To date, it still remains the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in the country. One of the lesser-known things about this is the case of the missing leg. Investigators discovered the leg laying among the rubble and identified it belonging to Lakeisha Levy. The only problem was she'd already been buried with both her legs. She was exhumed, her severed leg was placed in her coffin, while the other leg was taken to the FBI laboratory for identification. Since it had been embalmed, a DNA sample was unable to be obtained. The extra left leg, which had been mistakenly buried with Levy, is suspected to belong to an unidentified 169th victim, whose body had mostly disintegrated in the blast. even though perpetrators Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols had been convicted, with two others later identified as accomplices. This has led people to suspect there was an additional terrorist involved. So, who was the possible additional bomber? They still remain unidentified now, 25 years after the attack. I remember this bombing so well due to all the coincidental connections I had with it. My uncle worked across the street in an office with a window view. He took that day off and his office was covered in glass from the explosion. His son was one of the federal marshals that escorted Timothy McVeigh back to Oklahoma and fingerprinted him. My girlfriend at the time was questioned by the FBI because she was buying dog food at the co-op at approximately the same time they were buying the fertilizer for the bomb. Perhaps not the absolute strangest, but in March of 2020, the Windows market share for the long discontinued Windows XP skyrocketed by about 10% in China. This spike in Windows XP use for just 1 month is for unknown reasons. Some people think the Chinese government could have been looking for security flaws in the operating system to take advantage of. After all, lots of sensitive government equipment still runs on Windows XP. I'm pretty sure even some equipment, like machine equipment used to make parts that are used by the military, run Windows XP. That's it for today's series. There sure are a lot of unsolved mysteries out there, and even more we don't know of. Do you guys know any more stories that weren't featured today? If you do, and you're willing to share, please don't hesitate to comment down below. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to hear more, please like and subscribe to our videos. I'll see you soon. Bye!